Good morning, everybody. I'd like to welcome you to our study this morning. This is our last study in Ezekiel. We've been at this since the end of October. Now here we are at the end of September. So we're going to be 11 months in the book. We'll do chapter 48 today. It's about the allocation and allotment of the land to the tribes at the end of the during the Millennial Kingdom. The format of the video is going to be a little bit different today. Once we get into the lesson, we're going to be having a split screen because I've got a couple of handouts, or not handouts. They're not handouts now in a video, but they're a couple of illustrations on paper that I'm going to be using throughout the video. So will be split screen. I hope that doesn't bother you too much, but it's the only way I could figure out how to do this. So let's get right on into it and we'll see where it leads us. Okay, if I can keep from bumping these cameras today, we'll just see how well this is going to work. But in order to teach this, I really struggle with how to teach this lesson, this chapter in particular, because of the subject matter. It uses all of the 12 tribes by name, and it modifies actually who gets the which tribes get the allocation, the land allocations. Some will be excluded, some are going to be enhanced in various ways, but it's going to be it's going to require a little bit of discussion here. I think you'll find it interesting. We really go back all the way back to Genesis, probably 48, to get the order of the births of the children of Jacob. Let me just show you here. We have in order. Here's the names of the boys. There's Reuben. This is the order of the birth. This column right here, this numbered column, is the order of the births of the children. There's Reuben, and I might say Reuben has a kind of a storied past. Reuben had an affair with one of Jacob's concubines, and that the word of that got out, and that was not a pleasant situation. But also Reuben was the one that was kind of came to Joseph's aid when they threw him in the well. They were going to kill him, and he was kind of against that, and he tried to devise a plan where he could be saved, and he didn't get it all executed, and he ended up being shipped off to Egypt as a slave, and he went through all that business with Potiphar's wife. But nevertheless, the second child was Simeon. The third child was Levi. We all know who Levi was. He's the tribe of Levi, or is the priestly tribe. Then there was Judah. Judah is the fourth born, and Judah's tribe is noteworthy. Particularly, he was the most powerful tribe ultimately, but nevertheless, his tribe was the one from which the Messiah would come, which they did not realize at the time, of course. And then Dan is the fifth born. Dan, I'm just giving you this background just for give you some perspective on family greatness and family problems at the same time. Dan was the tribe that kept one of the golden calves during the apostasy of the northern kingdom. After the Civil War, there was a northern kingdom and a southern kingdom. Dan had one of the locations for one of the two golden calves that the northern kingdom used in their worship of Baal. Actually, they thought they were worshiping Yahweh, and they thought they were so messed up in their worship practices they thought Baal and Yahweh were the same God with two different names. Then there was Naphtali, there was Gad, and Asher. I neglected to tell you that the first four children were born to Leah. The next four children, Dan, Naphtali, Gad, and Asher, were born to two of the handmaidens of Leah and Rachel. Then that's your 8 children. The 9th children and the 10th child, it was Issachar and Zebulun. They were born to Leah. And then the number 12 and the number 13 boys were Joseph and Benjamin. They were born to Rachel. Now, I need to make a comment here real quickly. Joseph, as you remember, was the most favored son, and he enraged his brothers' jealousy, and they ended up throwing him in a well. They were going to kill him, and they threw him in a well. And as I already mentioned once, Reuben was instrumental in saving his life, but he was planning on going back and getting him. It didn't work out. He was traded off to slaves, shipped off to ultimately to Egypt, where he had this run-in, but this big fiasco with Potiphar's wife. Went to prison for that for a while, ended up interpreting a dream of Pharaoh, and worked his way up to the number 2 kingdom, which was instrumental in the salvation, I say the longevity and the existence of Jacob's family when they went over there as a result of famine, and then they were reunited in that Joseph had been elevated to the number 2 position, and he was able to show favor to his family. And then while Joseph was in Egypt, the number 13 boy was born, and that was Benjamin. He was also born to Rachel. Rachel was the favorite wife of Jacob. And these two boys, Benjamin became the favorite. Joseph was gone into Egypt. They didn't know where he was. They thought he was dead. But while he was out of the picture, Benjamin was born. Benjamin became the favored son now. Those are the only two boys born to Rachel, who was the favorite wife of Jacob. So that's almost all I have to say about that. But Joseph, while he was in Egypt, he had 2 sons named Ephraim and Manasseh. And as the end result of the unification of the family was that Jacob ended up adopting those 2 sons, took them in as his own, and then they ended up getting a tribal allotment of land, so that was the way Joseph did not get an allotment for himself, but his 2 boys got an allotment. That's the way Joseph ultimately got the double portion that was promised to him as a result of all the problems that the brothers caused to him in getting rid of him and all that. Okay, so that's the family. That's the order of the births. That's the mothers. So I think what we can do is get right on into it, except there's one thing I neglected to tell you from my notes, and that is that Asher is the number 8 son right here. I wanted to tell you this because I think it's interesting, and it has nothing to do with today's lesson. But Asher, number 8 son, and the location of his land, oil was discovered, and there's a pretty significantly sized oil company there today. It's named Asher Oil. I don't think many people know about that, but it's not something that's widely publicized. But they have an oil company over there. It's named Asher Oil because of the location of the company. Okay, so that's the beginnings of the family. That's where they all came from. It's their names, their order of birth. And the order of birth is significant because of what's going to happen with the allocation of the land and the gates to the temple and all that, which we're going to be talking about right now. Okay, so let's go to chapter 48. And I think we'll just start with the first 7 verses. There's a lot of detail here that is significant, but not significant, particularly significant from one son to the next. So let's start reading with the first 7 verses, and I probably won't read all of it, and I'll tell you why when we get to it. But let's start with chapter 48, verse 1. These are the tribes listed by name at the northern frontier. That means the northmost. Dan will have one portion. That's one portion of land. It will follow the Hethlon road to Lebo Hamath. Hazar Enon and the northern border of Damascus next to Hamath will be part of its border from the east side to the west side. Dan is the northernmost kingdom. Now, what I have over here in this column is the order, not the birth order, but the order of the allocation of land starting at the north. If you notice, Dan is number 1. He's the furthest north. This will have, I think, significance for us as we go further. Verse 2. Asher will have one portion. It will border the territory of Dan from east to west. So Asher is the number 2 coming down. Asher is right here, and he's got the number 2 allocation coming from the north. And it says that his territory will border the territory of Dan. So the northern part of his territory will touch the southern part of the territory for Dan. All right, then you come down now to verse 3, and it says Naphtali will have one portion. It will border the territory of Asher from east to west. So we go to Naphtali. He's the number 3 from the north. His land will be the number 3 allocation from the north. And his northern edge of his land will border the southern edge of Asher. So you see he was number 2, so this guy would be under Asher. And that's the way it goes down through. It keeps going through. The next one, verse 4, is the allocation for Manasseh. His territory borders on Naphtali. Then the next one is Ephraim. Now Ephraim, his border will border on the territory of Manasseh. Now here's what I want to point out to you. Here is Ephraim and Manasseh. They were the sons of Joseph, if you recall. Their number 4 and number 5 allocation of land. But that is Joseph's double portion. All right. Now, another thing that I neglected to mention to you is that these T's in this chart indicate tribal allocation of land. If you're a T, most likely you would think that's one of the tribes, but it's not quite the same. Because if you come down, if you recall, Levi does not inherit land. He's going to get some land, but not through inheritance. Levi, so he's taken out. Even though he's a tribe, I didn't put a T here by his name because he doesn't get a tribal allocation of land. Then you come down to Manasseh and Ephraim, and there's a T by them, but they weren't tribal leaders. Joseph was the tribal leader, but Joseph is not getting an allocation. his children are, his two boys, Ephraim and Manasseh. So I put the T by their name, even though they're not tribal. They're not tribal leaders. They will get tribal allocation of land. Okay, so and then that's the way it is all the way down through there. These N's and S's indicate whether they were in the northern part of Israel or in the allocation of the north or down to the south. I haven't been mentioning this, but these are these that I'm going through now are the northern allocations. If you notice, all the ends that we've talked about are in the ones we've talked about so far are ends. All the ones, let's see, we've talked about through going all the way through verse 7 would be Judah. So you start looking at these, 1, 2, these all have ends. 3, 4, 5, those are ends. 6 is an end. 7 is an end. 7 was Judah. Where's Judah? Right there. He's a 7. He's a north. And number 8 is well, I don't see 8. 8 is Gad. No, 8 is okay. We're out of the northern allocations with Judah. He's the last one. Now, when I say north and south, I do not want you to confuse that with northern kingdom and southern kingdom. There is no more northern kingdom. There is no more southern kingdom. The north here is just northern allocation, the allocations that are in the north of Israel. And because you can see, for example, Judah and Benjamin were the only two tribes that were in the southern kingdom, but they're both, one of them, Judah, is in the northern allocation of land. So I just don't want you to keep, if you're reading your Bible, you're going to see north and south. It's not northern kingdom or southern kingdom, it's just northern tribes of the northern allocation, and then the others are the south, not the southern kingdom, but the southern allocation of land. Hope that didn't confuse the issue. Okay, so that would be down through Judah. That's the first 7. Then what you need to do from there, we're going to jump a whole big bunch of verses and go over to verse 8 is Gad. Okay, then we jump over to verse 23 and we see Benjamin. And he is from the south allocation. Then Simeon borders on the land of Benjamin. Then we go down to Issachar. He borders on the land of Simeon. Issachar. And Zebulun, it's number 9 allocation from the south, from the north. Borders on the land of Issachar. Then Gad borders on the land of Zebulun. I think that gets all of it. So that's the way the tribal allocations are. What you will notice is, well, I don't know if you noticed, I wouldn't have noticed it, but I read it, so I'll report it to you. Dan is the furthest north, but he was not the firstborn. Ordinarily, you'd think, back in the biblical times, I say biblical times, the times of the Bible, we read of the the most favored position in the family is the firstborn son. Well, the firstborn son here was Reuben, and you would think that that maybe Reuben should get the first allocation of land, but he didn't. Dan got the first allocation of land. Okay, so the order of birth and the order of allocation of land are two different things. Now, when you come down to Judah, what I want to point out to you, if we were doing it, we know that the Messiah is going to come from Judah, or did come from Judah. So we might put Judah in the most favored position and make him get the first number one allocation of land. But no, that's not the way it worked out. And some people might say it's coincidence. It's not coincidence, I'm sure. There's no coincidence with God. What Judah ended up being was the seventh allocation of land. But the significant part of that is it put him right next to Jerusalem. He's the closest to Jerusalem. That's where all the action is. That's where the temple is. That's where God's throne is going to be, and all of that. So he ends up being right next to Jerusalem. And Benjamin is the closest to Jerusalem on the south side. Okay, so that's the major part of the stuff that I wanted to tell you about the tribes. All right, so they're all set up. I don't know how the size of the land is. It's probably there somewhere, and I missed it or forgot it one way or the other. I don't think it's in this chapter. It must be in one of the other chapters. But nevertheless, it brings us to another section that, when we were studying this, I jumped from verse 7 all the way over to verse 21, and I skipped the part in the middle. Well, the middle part there, from verse 8 on to verse 22, talks about land given to the Lord, land given to the prince. The portion of that land by special gift is made to the Levites and the priests and the Zadoks and that sort of thing, and to the city. The city is going to get a piece of this land, not the city. The city, I guess, it'll be the city of Jerusalem, though I haven't heard it called Jerusalem. It's not the New Jerusalem for sure. But we're going to go through some of that just so you'll see what I'm talking about. Let's read. I hope this doesn't get too confusing. It will be confusing. It'll be it'll be enigmatic at the worst, and maybe even the best. We'll see. So let me read verses 8 through 12. Maybe I'll comment as I go. I don't know how I'm going to do this. I never did quite figure that out. So let me read 8 through 12. Okay, starting with verse 8 of chapter 48. Bordering the territory of Judah from east to west. Remember, Judah was the last one allocated coming down from the north. Bordering the territory of Judah from east to west. And I kept saying from east to west. It's probably confusing. All of that land had the same east and west borders. It was all the same size, and it coming down from the north, but all the sizes were measured the same way to the east to west. So bordering the territory of Judah from east to west will be the portion you are to present as a special gift. It will be 25,000 cubits wide, and its length from east to west will equal one of the tribal portions. The sanctuary will be in the center of it. All right. I don't think there's anything else on here I need to tell you. If I do, I'll come back. Okay, this is you can tell I didn't do this one. I've scribbled all over it, but the tribal portions are up this way. The normal tribal portions are up here. The southern tribal portions are down here. There's the note of that. Okay, so the 25,000, what I just read, it's 25,000 wide and I think 5,000 long. It's that part right there. It's the part, it says it's the special portion, that sanctuary will be in the center of it. So there it is, the temple complex. Okay, the verse 9, the special portion you are to offer to the Lord will be 25,000 cubits long and 10,000 cubits wide. So, not quite sure. I think this is the special portion offered to the Lord. This will be the sacred portion for the priest. It will be 25,000 by 10,000 cubits wide on the west, 10,000 cubits wide on the east, 25,000 cubits long on the south. So a portion of this land goes to the priest. I think it's right here. I never did quite figure out if it was, I think it's this whole section right here is for the priest. In the center of it will be the sanctuary, so there's the sanctuary. This will be for the consecrated priests, that would be the Zadokites, who were faithful in serving me and did not go astray as the Levites did when the Israelites went astray. So there was a time of apostasy in the northern kingdom and the southern kingdom, but particularly in the northern kingdom, where the priests became extremely, they lost their way completely. And that was a long period of time, hundreds of years. So they had plenty of time to do it, but the Zadokite priests never did. They were an extension of the Levites. So this will be for them. It will be a special gift to them for the sacred portion of the land, a most holy portion, bordering the territory of the Levites. So here's the Levite portion up here, and here's the best part is down here. It's for the Zadokites, the Levites and the Zadokites. Then you come to verse 13. Alongside the territory of the priests, the Levites will have an allotment 25,000 by 10,000. Its total length will be 25,000 cubits and width 10,000 cubits. Then verse 14. This is interesting. Verse 14 says, they must not sell or exchange any of it. This is the best of the land and must not pass into other hands because it is holy to the Lord. It's been given to them, to the priest, and they might say, hey, I can make some money off of this. I think I'll sell part of this to the city. They could build a park out here or something. God says you can't do that. This land is not to be sold. It's because it's a holy land. It's a part of the, it's holy to the Lord is what it says here. That's what it said up above there as well. It's offered to the Lord, so it's holy. Okay, then verse 15 through 20. Let me just keep reading here till I see how far I want to go with it. I'll start at 15. The remaining area, 5,000 cubits wide and 25,000 cubits long, will be for the common use of the city for houses and pasture lands. So part of this allocation is going to the city, and people are going to live there and that sort of thing. The city will be in the center of it. It will have these measurements. The north side 4,500 cubits, the south side 4,500, east side 4,500. So it's a big square. Verse 17 says the pasture land for the city will be 250 cubits on the north, 250, 250. So it's a square. Then verse 18, What remains of the area bordering on the sacred portion and running the length of it will be 10,000 cubits on the east side and 10,000 cubits on the west side. Its produce will supply food for the workers, so it's going to be land to be cultivated and provide food for the workers, it says. The workers from the city who farm it will come from all the tribes of Israel. So it sounds like a big co-op, doesn't it? So verse 20 says the entire portion will be square, 25,000 on each side. As a special gift, you will set aside the sacred portion along with the property for the city as a special gift. Okay. Well, we're getting down to the last few verses, which is, again, it's very interesting. It's going to be talking about this guy named the Prince. Well, last week we talked about that being King David, the resurrected King David. And so we're going to see what the Bible has to say about that. I want to remind you again, I don't know how many times I've reminded you, but we want to start thinking about this being heaven, which would make it the new Jerusalem and the new earth, the new heaven, that sort of thing. It's not. This is the Millennial Kingdom. God reigns and rules from here, but it is not the new Jerusalem. It's the Millennial Kingdom. It's a time of 1,000 years where we will be here under the rule of David as of the Messiah as King of Kings and Lord of Lords. Israel will be ruled by the resurrected King David. All right, but it's not the new heaven and new earth. It's the Millennial Kingdom. All right, so let's look at verses 20, 21 through and 22. There's just a lot of words here for 2 verses. Let me read through it. It's just kind of listen as I read. What remains on both sides of the area formed by the sacred portion and the property of the city will belong to the prince. Here's the prince's land. It's split in 2 pieces, one on the east, one on the west, or west and east, I guess. Yeah, west. There's a compass, west and east. Prince's land, prince's land. It will extend eastward from 25,000 cubits of the sacred portion to the eastern border, and westward from 25,000 cubits to the western border. So I guess this is 25,000 cubits going out this way and 25,000 cubits going out that way. Both these areas running the length of the tribal portions will belong to the prince, and the sacred portion with the temple will be in the center of them. Verse 22, so the property of the Levites and the property of the city will be in the center of the area that belongs to the prince. Okay, so that's why we're starting to see that the Levites, the priestly tribe, does not inherit. They do not get. They get land. But it's not a tribal allocation. It's not an allotment because they're a tribal group. God is their inheritance, and this is what it means. They're They're not inheriting. A special gift is being given to them in the most holy portion. And it's not totally their land because they can't do anything with it. They only live there and worship there and serve there, but they can't sell the land or they can't do anything with it. So it's not an inheritance. It's a special gift. Okay, so the property of the Levites and the property of the city will lie in the center of the area that belongs to the prince. The area belonging to the prince will lie between the border of Judah and the border of Benjamin. That's here. I think this is border of Judah up here and the border of Benjamin down here. So that's how the allotment of the land works out. Now we're getting down to the end. We've already talked about, we didn't talk about the gates. All right, this is interesting. I say it's interesting. It's just something else to know, something we need to know. It's in the Bible. You know, we studied when we studied Revelation, there were gates to the New Jerusalem, and they were named after the tribes. And I don't think it's the same naming scheme that's here, because I'm not going to go back and look at it. You can run over there and look at it sometime on your own time and compare that to this and just see. By the way, if you want to take a screenshot of any of this, it makes it easier to go back and do some study. You ought to do that. You're free to do that. And I'll flip over. Let me just do it right now. If anybody wants a screenshot of this diagram of how the land was laid out, feel free to do that. I'll leave it there for a second. Then, and I'll say the same thing with this worksheet right here, this illustration right here. If you want a screenshot of it, it would help. It's got a lot of summaries going back in the days of Jacob and his family when they walked the earth. It shows who the mothers of the children were and that sort of thing, the order of birth. Save you a little research. But now we've got the gates to this new city. Didn't call it Jerusalem. I'm not sure it's ever called Jerusalem in here, but it probably is. Probably really is. So let's start with verse 30 and read through that. There's not a lot of noteworthy things there, but there is some detail that we need to be aware of. It's this column right here. These letters, north, south, east, and west. N, S, W, and E. There's an N, an S. There's a W. There's an E. There's 12 T's, and there's 3 of each direction. Okay, now let's read through here. Starting with verse 30. These will be the exits of the city, beginning on the north side, which is 4,500 cubits long. The gates of the city will be named after the tribes of Israel. Now, it's not the tribes of Israel. It's this tribal allocation here. No, I'm sorry. This is different. These gates are going to be named after the tribes, after the boys. You notice Levi gets a gate named after him. He's one of the tribes. He didn't get a tribal allocation of land, but he is going to have a gate named after him. And the same is going to be true of Joseph. Manasseh and Ephraim got a tribal allocation of land, but they don't get a gate named after him. In that case, Joseph is going to get it. So let's go through and read this. On the north side, the 3 gates on the north side will be the gates of Reuben, Judah, and Levi. So we go to Reuben. He's got an N and a little N in a circle. Levi gets an N, and Judah gets an N. Those are the northern gates. On the east side, verse 32, on the east side, which is 4,500 cubits long, will be 3 gates. Joseph, Benjamin, and Dan. So Joseph gets an east, Benjamin gets an east, and Dan gets an east. On the south side, which measures 4,500 cubic feet, 4,500 cubits, will be 3 gates. The gates of Simeon, Issachar, and Zebulun. Issachar gets a south, Zebulun gets a south, and what was the other one? Simeon. Simeon gets a south. A little S right there. If you can read that, if you took a screenshot of this, I've got gates up here above that, so there. Okay, on the west side, which is 4,500 cubits long, will be 3 gates. The gates of Gad, Asher, and Naphtali. Gad is west, Naphtali is west, and Asher is west. Is that all of them? North, south, east, and west. So that's the way. So you notice there's a slight change in the way they named gates and the way they allocated land. Just as a reminder, Levi does not get a tribal allocation of land, but he gets a gate named after him. Joseph did not get a tribal allocation of land. His family got a double portion, but not Joseph. But Joseph will have a gate named after him. Okay, that brings us to the close. Verse 35. The distance all around will be 18,000 cubits. And the name of the city from that time on will be The Lord is There. Wow. What a study. We've completed the book of Ezekiel. That is quite a feat, I think. And for those of you that stuck with me, I'm proud of you. I want to say, the Old Testament prophets, from a distance, if you've never gotten a firm foundation in what they're prophesying about, you can be confused and stay in a state of confusion without proper understanding. A study of Hosea, which is the apostasy of the northern kingdom, and a study of Ezekiel, which is the prophecy of the southern kingdom. If you study those two books in detail, like the way I teach them, verse by verse, it takes a long time to do that. But if you pay attention to and meditate on what you're studying, actually you don't even have to meditate on it. It's pretty much there just for the study of it. But if you can study those, you will understand Old Testament prophets. You will understand the problems that Israel was having. They were in a state of what those two books point out and dwell on is that they were in a state of apostasy, like it's unimaginable apostasy. It's the thing I told you. I haven't said this in a long time. I studied Ezekiel on my own personal Bible study time before I studied Hosea. But when I studied Ezekiel, I was shocked at the condition of God's chosen people. There was idol worship. There was prostitution with temple prostitutes, sex act in the name of religion. There was in Hosea it talks about the alcoholism, the drug use, and the prostitution of the priests. Their involvement in it. How the priests got a lot of the blame for the problems of the people because they were not equipped to teach the people about God. You can go back and read the verses in chapter 4 of Hosea that follow after the first 3 verses, and it's talking about the indictment of the priest. It's pretty shocking. And in Ezekiel, I think it's Ezekiel 8, you talk about the idolatry in the temple. It's things if you're not up on the study of the Old Testament prophets, you're going to get a shock. You're going to be shocked when you study it. So just sometime when you want to look for something you can study on your own time, you can use these videos. We've got playlists for all of Hosea, playlists for all of Ezekiel. You can study that and get a good foundation of that, and it'll give you a deeper understanding of the Old Testament. And I'd recommend that you do it, even though we've been through both books here with these 2 video series. I would recommend that you go back and study it on your own again. Okay, that's all I have for you today. I'd like to thank you for being with me during this whole time and today particularly. Thank you very much.